Hello everyone, we're going to continue now with the third last talk with Szymon Nowak, and he will talk a little bit more about WebRTC.
Yeah, okay, it works. Hi everyone. I'm going to talk about WebRTC API, and this talk won't be really very technical talk. I just want to show you some interesting examples of WebRTC applications and give you some ideas for WebRTC applications that you could write yourself. So I really do hope that you'll find this stuff interesting and that you'll really want to write WebRTC app yourself. So let me just introduce myself. My name is Szymon Nowak. I'm from Poland. I'm a web developer at Cowbell Labs. It's a really tiny company. And how many of you have actually heard about WebRTC before? Okay, a few. And how many of you have actually written any WebRTC app? Okay, one person. So I really do hope that after this talk, at least some of you will try. Okay, so for those of you who haven't heard about WebRTC, let me just briefly explain what it actually is. So WebRTC API allows you to create peer-to-peer connection between browsers. So that means that it allows you to create a direct connection without any server in the middle. And such connections are really cool because they are usually faster, because the data doesn't have to travel through any server, and also much more secure. So using such connection, you can actually transfer anything you like. You can transfer audio streams, you can transfer video streams, and you can transfer like any arbitrary data. But WebRTC is actually advertised most of the time, at least, as a plugin-free video calls. And that's true, and that's really great for your users. But as a developer, it's not that exciting unless you want to build another Hangouts or Skype. Also, if you look, for example, for WebRTC-related stuff on like Twitter, you'll find a lot of tweets with links to articles like WebRTC ready to get real, or how will WebRTC affect the business voice over IP market, or will mobile help or hinder WebRTC? Oh, that's a cool one. More talk about how WebRTC can disrupt existing telecom infrastructure with OTT comms. So it all sounds very enterprisey, and for you as developers, it's probably not very exciting unless you work for a telecom. So WebRTC actually gives us like a lot of new features that weren't really possible before at all. So let me actually tell you a story how I actually got into this. So actually, that's how. So I went to a game hackathon, and I decided to build a multiplayer game because I really didn't want to design levels for a single-player game. So yeah, as you can see, the level design is pretty sophisticated in this one. So basically, I haven't finished the game. As you can see, there's only one player. But if you're writing a multiplayer game in a browser, most likely you'll use WebSockets, right? But WebSockets have a disadvantage that they actually use TCP, which has relatively high latency. So I actually started looking for like other opportunities. What are other ways to write multiplayer games in a browser? And that's actually how I found about WebRTC. So it wasn't like the audio and video stuff. So let me tell you a brief history of WebRTC. It will be really, really short. So in late 2011, we had the first draft of the spec. Over a year later, there was the first cross-browser video call. Here's a link to it. And the funny thing is that if you read about it on Google blog, it says that the video call was between Chrome and Firefox. If you read about it on Mozilla's blog, it says it was between Firefox and Chrome, of course. So the whole year later, we finally got cross-browser data transfers. So that's the thing that interests me most. And very recently, just a month ago, Hangouts actually use WebRTC on Chrome. So even if you haven't heard about WebRTC, you may actually use it already, if you use Hangouts on Chrome, at least. So that's like kind of, because Google actually uses some non-standard stuff. So they use it like for like a test field. So they are testing various features of WebRTC in Hangouts because it's used by millions of users. So we probably won't see like Hangouts using WebRTC in Firefox, for example. So let's start with examples of applications and services that use audio and video. So this is a picture of Kindle. And Amazon has this service called Amazon Mayday, which is a really cool service. So basically, you just tap a button, and you get a video call with their support in just a few seconds. And the funny thing is that you can see them, but they can't see you. They can only see your screen. So they can also, for example, draw on your screen to like indicate where you should click to just help you. And the thing is that because this video connection is like peer-to-peer, so it doesn't go through any servers, you don't really need any fancy infrastructure to write something like that. So it would be really, really easy to write very similar service. So there is asterisk at the end, because it's not entirely true. So there is this thing called signaling. So basically, when you want to establish a WebRTC connection, you have to exchange some data first. And WebRTC specification describes what kind of data you should exchange, but it doesn't specify how you should do it. So you could exchange this data like using WebSockets, which are most popular. You could use Ajax. You could even like use email, whatever, or some third-party service like Pusher, PubNap, or Firebase. So in the case of third-party server, you don't really need any servers on your own. So the signaling part is like necessary to actually establish the connection. Later on, everything happens just directly between browsers. So if you don't really want to bother with all that stuff, there is a service called OneClick, and it actually allows you to create a service like Amazon Mayday on your website with just a few lines of code. And it has some really nice features. It allows you to record these calls. And also, they do some fancy stuff so that even if you have a really crappy connection, you can get quite decent video quality. So that was, yeah, so I mentioned that WebRTC allows you to create connections between two browsers, right? But it can also be used for other stuff as well. So how about calling a phone from a browser? So here's the first demo. Let's hope it will work. So here's a simple application. I'll upload all slides to GitHub. So you'll be able to like check out the links, and all these applications are open sourced. Yeah, almost. OK, so hello? OK, seems like it works. And OK, so as you can see, you can use WebRTC to make a phone call. Sorry. And the thing is that for such application, you actually need a third-party service that will act as a gateway between your browser and the phone network. So in this case, I'm using Twilio, but there are other very similar services as Twilio. And this application is like really, really simple. So that's Ruby code. Sorry for that. That's the whole backend, like maybe 15 lines of code, and it's the whole backend for this application. And that's actually the whole front end, like at least JavaScript part. So you can, of course, it uses Twilio library that takes care of all this WebRTC related stuff, so you don't have to worry about it. But it's like really, really easy to write. So the thing is that it would be a really cool idea to actually wrap all this code into web component, and you could turn any phone number on any page into like clickable link, which you can just click and make a phone call. So you can think of adding something like that for example, contact us page or your support page, whatever. So your users can actually make a phone call straight from your browser without retyping the phone number to their phone. And I think it's like a really, really great user experience. So that was browser to phone, but it's actually possible to call a browser from a phone. So that's the second demo. So this is a really strange application. It's called Frisbee, and it allows you to actually make like almost free or completely free international calls. So it works in a bit complicated way. So you enter a number you want to call. This service calls this number and then hangs up. And the other person calls back, and they get connected straight to your browser. So the thing is that this service uses actually a local number for the number that you want to call. So the person who calls back, it's always a local call. So if you have like free local calls, so wherever the browser is, you can get like free call. So let's try it out. I hope, yeah. Okay, so it's calling. It will hang up in a second. Okay. Oh, shit. How do I answer actually here? Okay. Missed call. Right. Hello. Hello. Right. Yeah, so you can actually call a browser, which is, I have no idea how it works, really, but it's really, really cool. So another service I want to show you is appear.in, and it's a very simple video conversation app, but I think it's like the nicest looking one of all of them that exist. But the interesting thing is, so very recently, like less than 2 weeks ago, they've posted photo of a video call between Firefox OS device and iPhone. So the thing is that mobile Safari does not support WebRTC, but there are native libraries for iOS, for Android, native libraries for written in Node.js. And you can write native applications that can accept and make WebRTC connections to like browser or another native applications. So even though iPhone doesn't support WebRTC, you can actually write an app that will add such support to it. So just a short recap. So as developers, you don't really need fancy infrastructure because all data is actually like peer-to-peer, so it goes directly between browsers or devices, whatever. And your users do not need any third-party app accounts. And they also do not need to install any plugins or anything. So I'd like to show you 3 interesting applications that do nothing more than just one-to-one video call. It's really, really simple. So the first one is called Speaky. And basically, if you want to learn a new language, it helps you find a native speaker. And you can buy like video lessons. And it is WebRTC for those videos. So I think it's like really good idea. And it's probably really simple to implement. So this is really funny one. It's called Raft.fm, and it allows you to host live video rap battles. So if you're not very into it, you don't have to participate. You can watch one as a guest, and it's a really funny experience. So the last application I want to show you is like more serious one. It's called Be My Eyes. And it allows blind people to request assistance from volunteers. So they wrote an application, and blind person can simply tap it, and they get like video connection with the volunteer. and they can point their device, for example, to a label or something like that, and the volunteer can read it for them. So the application itself is like probably really trivial to write. It's like just one-to-one video call. It's really simple. But like social implications are really, really huge, I think. So yeah, I suppose, yeah, I want to show you like live demo of this app. That's me. But it didn't really work that well. So I just made a screenshot. So the thing is, it's just one-to-one video call. But the trick here is that both participants can select the language that they're speaking. And this application will use Speech API to actually recognize what you're saying. It will send the transcript to Google Translate, translate it to the language of the other person, send it over data channel to the other person, and read it back in their language. So it's actually on GitHub. I'll upload it, the slides later, so you can try it out. It doesn't really work that well. So web speech recognition is really crappy. And I wrote it like less than a day. So yeah, there are probably tons of bugs. And yeah, you can't really try it on one computer because you have like feedback and everything, and it's terrible. So you need to use two computers and actually be like in some distance from each other. So another thing that you can do with WebRTC is like image or other video processing. So you can actually do like anything you want. You can do motion detection, object tracking, face detection, augmented reality, any kind of processing that you can think of. And here's actually a funny application. It's a baby monitor. It actually detects when the baby moves and sends notifications to browser's console. So this is like a really, really simple application, but the thing is it could be like really greatly improved. So instead of sending notifications to your browser console, you could send notification to your phone, for example, right? And you could simply tap this notification and get a live feed of whatever happens there. So you could use like a baby monitor, but you could use it also as a surveillance system, for example, to detect any motion at your home, for example, while you're away. Yeah, and also the connection is like in two directions. So you can also just, I don't know, shout at the baby or whatever you want. So you can do image processing, but you can also do audio processing. So there is the API called Web Audio API. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. But the thing is that it can be integrated with WebRTC. And it allows you to do really a lot of cool stuff. So you can, for example, measure volume. So for example, with the baby monitor, you could detect when baby starts crying, for example. Or when somebody at your home breaks a window, whatever. The second thing is that it can not only analyze the stream, but it can also modify it. So for example, you could change pitch of your voice. So you could write an application that allows you to do phone calls. And you could use web audio to change your voice, for example, like Darth Vader or something like that. And web audio is really cool because it's not only for analyzing and modifying sound, it can also create sound. And also allows you to play back audio files. So you could create like your small own radio station that's broadcasted using peer-to-peer network. So all this processing is like takes a lot of CPU and energy, right? So there is a workaround for that, and you can offload all this processing to like a third-party service. So you don't really have to do it on the client itself. So there is like very interesting project called Currento. It's open source, written in Java, and it's basically something called media server. So media server is a server that can accept WebRTC connections. So the thing is that you can connect to it from your browser and send, for example, a video or audio stream there. And it can actually do like anything with this stream. So it can, for example, transcode it and record it to your disk. It can do motion detection, for example, and it can send back notifications to your browser through the same WebRTC channel. that you're sending the video stream. So it's like very modular. You can write your own modules, so you could do like voice recognition in it as well. So another thing that WebRTC allows is screen sharing. You're probably familiar with screen sharing from Hangouts. This device also uses WebRTC to share your browser to your TV. So again, these connections do not necessarily have to be between two browsers. You can connect to your TV as well. So screen capturing actually is a bit more complicated than simple video calls because of security reasons. So in Chrome, you have to write an extension that's like associated with your web page. In Firefox, it's even more complicated, like at least for users, because you have to enable a configuration flag and then add domain to the whitelist, which is like for regular users probably like impossible to do. So if you're interested in all of this, there is a really cool page called WebRTCexperiments.com, and it basically collects all implementations of every WebRTC feature. So it also has implementation for screen capturing and screen sharing as well. So you could do live screen sharing, for example, live streaming games. So you probably heard about Twitch TV, right? And that it got bought recently, I think, by Amazon. So you could use WebRTC and screen sharing to create your own Twitch TV, like peer-to-peer version of it. So another cool idea is live streaming presentations. So it's already possible to synchronize slides with your audience, like using, for example, WebSockets. But what if you, right, I'm not sure. Yeah. So what if you wanted to do like live coding? Usually, you can't simply use the same technique using WebSockets, right? So in this case, WebRTC could actually help. Yeah, so that picture is like from a live coding session where the presenter at the very beginning tried to figure out if the font is actually visible to everyone. So if you can't read this, it says, raise your hand if you can't read this. So the issue with that is that WebRTC, or rather like any peer-to-peer architecture, doesn't really scale that well. So if you imagine that I want to share my screen with all of you, I would have to create like, I don't know, maybe 50 or 100 WebRTC connections and stream my screen through all these connections. So it wouldn't simply work. So there are like ways, other types of architecture. And if you have some idea for web application that's supposed to have like thousands of connections, I really recommend you watch this presentation, where Ross Kuklinski actually shows like various architecture to handle like really large amount of connections. Okay, so now we're leaving audio and video stuff and move to transferring data. So like I mentioned before, or maybe I didn't, WebRTC allows you to have like really low latency networking, which is really, really cool because it can be used for multiplayer games. So if you're familiar with, I'm not sure if you know about multiplayer games, but basically most like fast-paced multiplayer games, they don't use TCP. They use UDP because it's much, much faster. The bad thing is that it's actually unreliable. So you can't really know whether all stuff you sent will actually arrive. I'm not sure, has anybody heard about banana bread? No? So let's hope it works. OK, so banana bread is actually a first-person shooter game written in C++, and it was compiled to JavaScript. So this game actually runs in a browser, and it uses WebRTC for multiplayer networking. So it was done like over a year ago by Mozilla to show off ASM.js. Yeah, so it's almost finished. So I think it's like really cool. Unfortunately, the it's really complicated. Like I said, it was compiled from C++, so it's not really that easy to read the code. But fortunately, there is another game called CubeSlam that works like that looks like this. So that's actually a game made for Google as a Google experiment last year. And it uses WebRTC for two things. The first thing is multiplayer networking. And the second thing is that if you play with a real person, then instead of this lovely bear, you can see a live feed of them. This application is like much simpler than Banana Bread. It's open sourced, so if you want to try it out and or see how it actually works, you can check it out on GitHub. It uses like all cool stuff like web audio, WebGL, WebRTC, like everything. So if you're interested actually in multiplayer networking, there is a great source. There's a great article that describes multiplayer networking in Source Engine. It's by Valve. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that company, but basically they made games like Half-Life, for example, or Counter-Strike. So it turns out that doing multiplayer networking over unreliable connection is not that easy. So if you think like you want to write something like that, I recommend you read that, and then you probably won't. So a really cool feature that WebRTC provides is file sharing. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with that picture, but basically it says that we've had internet for decades, and yet sending files is something we are still trying to figure out how to do, right? If you want to send a file to someone that is like bigger than you can fit into email, it's really not that easy, right? You can use services like Dropbox or something like that, but you need accounts, and it's basically complicated. So I wrote a service called ShareDrop, which basically, the video is terrible. It's from some Japanese website. I probably won't show it, but you can check. That's actually the URL, so you can check it out. And the thing is, it actually copies user interface from Apple AirDrop. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but it's a service that basically allows you to transfer files very easily between devices, like nearby devices. It creates an ad hoc network. So ShareDrop actually does not create an ad hoc network because it's not possible yet in browsers. But if you open this URL in two devices that are in the same network, that means that they both have the same public IP. They will see each other, and you can quite easily transfer files, I think, up to 4 gigabytes or something like that. So it not only works on actually all like computers, Macs, Windows, Linux, whatever, but it also works on Android devices. Yeah, so maybe I'll show you just this small part of it. There. Yeah? Yeah. Thanks. So the video is really terrible. I really wanted to show to do a live demo, to take a picture of all of you and show that it's possible to like transfer it from an Android phone to the computer. Unfortunately, there's some strange stuff going on with the network here, so it didn't really work. Yeah, so there's like a different UI for Android, like for small devices. Yeah, it's terrible. Yeah, okay, not that interesting. So another quite similar service is RipIO. And a nice feature that they have is you can do video streaming. And it's a bit different video streaming that I was talking before. So if you want to send a video file, the other person does not have to wait for the whole file to be downloaded to watch it. They can start watching it as it's being downloaded. So they simply download chunks from the very beginning, and yeah, you can just start watching it while it's being downloaded. So the thing is that it works only with a few video formats, but they are working on it, and I think it will be. It's not open source yet, but it will be open source very, very soon. So Another quite similar application is ShareFest. It looks rather ugly. However, it's like the most interesting one, actually. So the other two simply just send files in chunks. It's nothing really complicated. This actually uses something that resembles BitTorrent. So if you, for example, have 3 peers and 2 of them have the same file, then the third peer can download the same file from 2 peers at the same simultaneously. So at least in theory, it should be twice as fast. Of course, if you have like 10 peers or whatever that have the same file, it will be even faster. So it's like really, really interesting. However, this is like similar to BitTorrent, but what you can do is actually write a BitTorrent using WebRTC. So there is a project called WebTorrent that actually tries to implement the whole BitTorrent protocol using WebRTC right in your browser. It's not completed yet, but like yeah, I think like it's ready in like 80% or something like that. So pretty soon you'll be able to like have a BitTorrent client right in your browser. If you add stuff to it like video streaming, you can make, I'm not sure if you're familiar with applications like Time for Popcorn, something like that, you'll probably be able to write something like that right in your browser. So another interesting thing is CDN augmentation. It sounds really strange, but the thing is that imagine you own YouTube, for example, and there is like a new Justin Bieber video, and there are like millions of people who watch it at the same time. So currently, you would need like a lot of servers to handle such load. But what CD augmentation allows you to do is it creates peer-to-peer connections between all these people that watch the same video. And they actually can download the file not only from your servers, but also from each other as well. So there is actually, or rather was, a service called PeerCDN. Its co-founder actually is the author of WebTorrent. So this service no longer exists. It was bought by Yahoo last year. So yeah, it's I think it was like the first big WebRTC-related company that was bought by like really, really huge company. So another service that actually still works and hasn't been bought by Yahoo yet is Swarmify. If you're like more interested how it all works, they have videos on their site that explain it in detail. But yeah, basically you can, if you have like applications that serves video, audio, or any kind of like a lot of data, you can use technology like that to like reduce load on your servers. So that's actually the last example, but it's like really interesting. So the thing is that you can actually create a web server in your browser. It sounds strange, but there is a project called PureServer. And basically, they provide you like full IDE in a browser, database, and all that stuff. And you can write your web application right in your browser, and it will act as a server. So the other people can use their browser to connect to this page. And the thing is that once you actually like close it, the server is gone. So it may not be very useful, but it's like really, really cool idea. So there was something like, I'm not sure if you heard about it, but a few years ago there was like Opera Unite. Opera browser made this thing called Unite, which was basically like a server in your browser, but it was like very specific to Opera. And you could use that, for example, to like at your home, you could leave Opera opened and serve, for example, all your music files. So it might be interesting if it's actually possible to do something similar with WebRTC. OK, so how does WebRTC actually work? So when you start reading about WebRTC, you'll find stuff like that, which is probably very, very confusing and overwhelming. So if you're interested in it, I really recommend to watch this presentation. It's a presentation from last year's Google I/O. And it was done by Justin Uberti, who's like WebRTC tech lead in Google. And it like explains like all this stuff from this slide in like really simple way. So yeah, so all this stuff is really complicated, but fortunately there are libraries that make it much, much easier. So there are more libraries than those, but I've actually used both of them. Yeah, so one is called Simple WebRTC, the other one is PureJS. So that's an example of application that uses Simple WebRTC library, and that's actually the whole code you need to write a video conferencing app. So basically, you just pass IDs of an element where it should display your local video. You pass ID of element where it should display remote videos. And then you simply join a room, and that's all. If you want to send data, you just need a few more lines. You can simply use a method send directly to all that you just add some stuff, and you can listen to those messages. So WebRTC, simple WebRTC is really actually simple. The other library, PureJS, I'm using it in ShareDrop. However, I modified it a lot. The original version worked with a WebSocket server, and I'm using Firebase. But the idea is the same. So browser support, right? So WebRTC works, of course, in Chrome, Opera, because it's almost Chrome now, and Firefox. Of course, it doesn't work in IE and Safari. And the cool thing is that IE most likely will actually implement kind of WebRTC in the next version. Microsoft and one other company came up with a like alternative API, like always. But this time it's actually a bit different because the new API is actually better. So it's called ObjectRTC. So the thing is that if you recall the process of signaling that I was talking at the very beginning, that you need to like exchange some information to be able to establish the connection. The thing is that WebRTC was actually created in cooperation with telecoms, and they are using some stuff like that. The information that you have to exchange is like plain text stuff, and it's like really, really hard to parse. You have to use regex for that, and it's like terrible. So this new ObjectRTC API, like the name suggests, uses objects instead of plain text. So it should be much, much easier for developers. So the cool thing is that while IE most likely will implement this new API, you can create like a shim library on top of it to get the same functionality as WebRTC 1.0. And another thing is that those two APIs will most likely be merged in what will become the next version of WebRTC. I don't know, 1.1 or 2.0, whatever. So yeah, the only thing that's left is actually Safari, which is like becoming a new IE. And yeah, nobody knows actually when they'll support WebRTC, right? So at least according to Google, I have no idea where they took this number from, but according to Google, we'll have almost like 2 billion devices by the end of 2014 that actually work with WebRTC. So what I want to like tell you is that it doesn't really makes much sense to wait for the other browsers to implement it. There are plenty of devices that already support WebRTC, and you also can use native libraries for devices that don't support WebRTC yet. So as you could see, WebRTC have like, you could use it in many, many different ways. And as you can see, using libraries like simple WebRTC, it's actually not that hard to write a WebRTC application. So I really, really encourage you to write one, at least try it out. Yeah, that's all. Thank you. So do you have any questions? Do we have time for?
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you for the talk. Very interesting insights in all the different parts. I have a very technical question for you, which is about the stun server. Do you actually run your own stun server? Because that was the one thing that I stumbled upon.
I'm using the Google server. Google provides like publicly available stun server that you can use like for free in non-commercial projects. So ShareDrop actually uses that. So if you use simple WebRTC, they have their own server. So that's why you don't really have to like set up anything. So that's why it was so small. The code was so small. The signaling server and stun server for simple WebRTC is like a separate project. So you can run it yourself. So the default one runs on HTTP only. It's not available on HTTPS. So if you want to run it on HTTPS, you have to run it yourself. But it's like, you can deploy it. For example, the application I showed with the translation stuff, it uses simple WebRTC, and I've just deployed the server to Heroku for free. So it's like, it works.
I tried it without a library and wrote all the code myself, and the thing that I couldn't get to run was the stun server. So
right.
That's why I'm asking.
Yeah, but you can actually use the Google one. It works. But for example, for ShareDrop, I do not use turn servers, so it does not always work. Yeah, but it's just too expensive to actually handle such stuff. Any other questions? If you have some crazy idea for WebRTC application, you can also ask if you want.
The PureServer or web server in your browser thing stirred my interest.
Right.
So how would you discover that web server?
So basically, you get like a URL. So the web server is in a browser. It's a bit hacky actually, because it's more like application server than actually web server. So it serves you an application from an existing web server, right? So when you open this PureServer app page, you can select from one of predefined applications, so you can create yourself, and then you get URL that you can share with others, and that's how they can open your page. So it's really, really hacky, but it actually kind of works. The thing is that I'm not sure if it works right now because the project was written like about a year ago, and since then WebRTC has changed quite significantly. So I had some issues with that. Yeah, but it's open source, so you can check it out. And it's documented really well because it was written by some, I think, Stanford graduate students as a project. So it's documented really, really well. So you can, just try it out. Any other questions? Okay. Right?
Hi. Do you have any idea when do we see it in mobile browsers?
So it works in Android already. So like I said, the ShareDrop application, you can very easily transfer, for example, your photos from your phone to your computer. And on Android, it works in Opera, Chrome, and Firefox, of course. So on other devices, yeah.
I mean those tiny company with the Apple logo.
Yeah. So like I said, nobody knows really. So the thing is that all these big companies like Google, Microsoft, Facebook, or Apple, they actually own some kind of messenger application, right? So Apple has FaceTime, Google has Hangouts, Facebook has also their messenger stuff, and Microsoft bought Skype, right? So at least for Apple, it might not make sense actually to implement WebRTC because the FaceTime simply, it wouldn't make much sense. It wouldn't be that useful, right? I'm not sure if it's actually that's why the reason why they don't implement it yet. But yeah, I can only guess. But it might be one of the reasons. Yeah, but you can, like I showed, there is native application for iOS, so you can write native application that uses that. If you really want to have WebRTC on your iPhone, And actually, most of these applications that I've shown, like appear.in, and there are other conferencing applications, most of them actually provide an iOS application for iPad or iPhone, so that you can join a conversation with other people who use like Android or a browser. And yeah, it works. I'm not sure about like if these libraries implement like all latest WebRTC features, but like the basic stuff like video connections should work. Okay, thank you.
All right, guys.